And I actually love this one. It's so cute and I like how the hat looks on it.
The sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the grand kitchen, filling the golden-colored walls with a false sense of warmth. The mansion stood proud, elegant, and polished from the outside, but behind its gleaming doors lived a story no one could imagine. On that bright morning, the silence of wealth was shattered by the desperate sobs of a little girl. Kneeling on the polished hardwood floor, her small hands pressed against the ground, a silver bucket overturned beside her, its water spreading like tears across the floor. Her dress, once a soft shade of blue, clung to her trembling body as she wept, "My hand hurts so much." Her fragile voice echoed through the hall, but only one person stood near her, someone who should have comforted her, yet instead only watched, almost pleased at the sight of her pain. And in the doorway, footsteps approached. The man of the house, a figure of power and authority, was about to enter a scene that would change the course of all their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to heal broken hearts, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story we tell carries the hope of reminding the world that love and empathy are never wasted. The little girl, only 7 years old, had already learned too much about pain and silence. Though her father was a millionaire, respected in boardrooms and admired by strangers, she lived more like a shadow in her own home. Her mother had passed away years ago, leaving a void that money could never fill. In her absence, another woman stepped in, a stepmother draped in jewels, gowns, and false smiles. To outsiders, she seemed perfect, charming, even generous. But when the doors closed and no eyes were watching, her true nature emerged. Chores piled on the small shoulders of the girl, and every mistake was met with scolding, with punishments that no child should endure. That morning, while trying to clean the floor, the girl had slipped, her hand catching the sharp edge of a fallen glass. Tears burned in her eyes not only from the wound, but from the loneliness of having no one to run to, no arms to hold her and say it would be okay. The mansion's grandeur could not hide the cries that rose from the kitchen. The father, who had just returned from an important meeting, stepped through the doorway with a leather briefcase in hand. His eyes widened at the sight before him, his little girl crumpled on the floor, sobbing, clutching her injured hand, while his wife towered over her with cold disapproval. For a moment, time stood still. The clash of wealth and suffering painted a picture he could no longer ignore. The man who had spent his life chasing deals, fortune, and success suddenly realized that he had missed the most important meeting of all, the one with his daughter's broken heart. But before his arrival, life had been a series of long days for the girl. Day after day, she scrubbed floors, polished silver, and carried burdens far heavier than her tiny arms should have known. She would watch the sunlight dance on the marble counters, imagining that maybe, just maybe, her mother was still somewhere in that light, watching her, protecting her. Each morning began with chores, and each night ended with silent tears pressed into her pillow. She tried to smile when her father glanced at her during dinners, but he rarely noticed the scratches on her hands, the sadness in her eyes. He was too busy with his empire, too convinced that providing wealth was enough to make up for his absence. Yet in truth, the little girl didn't want diamonds or mansions, she only wanted love. As the days passed, her pain deepened. She felt invisible, unheard, unloved, though her heart still clung to hope. And on that particular morning, when the bucket slipped and the glass broke, it was as if the universe itself decided enough was enough. Her cries grew louder, filling the grand hallways, reaching the ears of the one man who could make a difference. Her father's footsteps echoed closer, and with each step, destiny shifted. For in that moment, the weight of his choices would crash upon him, and he would be forced to see what he had long ignored. The tension in the room built like a storm. His wife quickly straightened, masking her face with false innocence, as though she had been helping the child all along. But the sight of blood on his daughter's small hand cut through every excuse, every lie, and every illusion of happiness he had believed in. The world of luxury he had built suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the broken child at his feet. And as his heart raced, the sound of her words, "My hand hurts so much," rang in his ears like a haunting melody he could never forget. The father stood frozen in the doorway, his briefcase dangling from his hand, forgotten. Sunlight poured in behind him, but it seemed the brightness of the morning could not chase away the shadows that clung to the room. His daughter's sobs cracked something deep inside him, something he had locked away for years in the pursuit of wealth and power. He saw the blood on her small hand, dripping onto the wooden floor, mixing with the spilled water. He saw her trembling shoulders as she tried to stay silent even in her pain, as though afraid her cries would only make things worse. And suddenly, memories of his late wife flooded back, the woman who once told him, holding their newborn baby in her arms, that this little girl was the most precious gift life had given them. How had he drifted so far from that promise? For years, he had convinced himself he was doing his best. He built an empire, believing that success would shield his daughter from pain, believing that comfort meant safety. Yet here she was, dressed in a faded gown, kneeling on the floor like a servant in her own home, her hands scarred not from play but from labor. His gaze shifted to the woman beside her, the wife he had chosen after losing the love of his life. She looked beautiful as always, draped in jewels, her red gown sweeping across the polished floor, but her beauty now seemed hollow. There was no trace of maternal warmth in her eyes, only annoyance at the scene unfolding. The millionaire suddenly realized the cruel truth: the woman he trusted to care for his daughter had instead crushed her spirit. But the story did not begin here. To understand this moment, one must look back at the lonely days that shaped the little girl's world. Each morning began the same way, sunlight streaming through the windows, but no voice to greet her, no gentle hand to brush her hair. She would rise quietly, slipping from her bed before anyone else stirred, and head straight to the kitchen. There, she would be given tasks far beyond her years, scrubbing dishes, wiping down counters, polishing the silver that gleamed but never filled her with pride. Her stepmother often stood nearby, not with words of encouragement, but with criticisms that pierced deeper than any wound. Not clean enough. Do it again. The words replayed in her mind each day, leaving her to wonder if she would ever be good enough. The girl tried to endure, telling herself that her father must never know. She loved him too much, even though his absence hurt. She believed that if she complained, it would only add to his burdens, that maybe he would blame himself, and she couldn't bear that thought. So, she stayed quiet, hiding her pain behind a fragile smile at dinner tables, nodding politely when asked how her day had been, and never once daring to reveal the truth. But children, no matter how strong, are not made for such silence. Her small body carried the weight of chores and the sting of loneliness, yet her soul still longed for love. Every evening, when the world was quiet, she would kneel by her bed and whisper a prayer, asking her mother, wherever she was, to watch over her. She prayed that one day her father would look at her not just with pride but with true understanding, that he would see past the walls of wealth into the little heart that simply wanted to be held. That morning was different because fate had finally aligned. The bucket of water slipped, the glass shattered, and pain sliced through her hand. She cried out louder than she ever had before, her voice echoing through the marble halls, refusing to be silenced by fear. Her stepmother's scolding grew sharper, but so did the cries of her soul. And at that precise moment, her father returned earlier than expected, stepping into a truth he could no longer ignore. The father's chest tightened as he took in the scene. His daughter's tears rolled down her flushed cheeks, leaving streaks across her pale skin. The cut on her hand wasn't deep, but the sight of her blood was enough to bring a storm of guilt crashing down. He saw, for the first time, how fragile she had become, how much she had suffered in silence. And beneath her pain, he recognized something even more heartbreaking, the look of fear in her eyes, as though she wasn't sure if he would protect her or walk away again. That expression tore through him more than anything else ever had. He set his briefcase down and knelt to the floor, ignoring the expensive fabric of his suit brushing against the spilled water. The millionaire who had once commanded boardrooms now found himself trembling as he reached for his daughter's injured hand. The little girl flinched at first, and used to tenderness, but when she realized it was her father, she allowed him to hold her. He pressed a handkerchief to the wound, but it wasn't just the cut he was trying to heal, it was years of neglect, years of absence, years of unspoken words. And as he held her, he whispered a silent promise to himself: this was the moment everything would change.